All right, good afternoon. Yesterday I was on stage and I made what I consider a major faux pas. I didn't actually introduce myself. So with apologies, my name is Mike Milinkovich and I'm the Executive Director of the Eclipse Foundation. So just want to welcome you to this plenary panel. I think they might have updated the website, but the board out there, of course, said it's like, you know, an update on Eclipse or the Eclipse Foundation. But we hijacked that because we actually wanted to talk about what is actually currently taking a lot of our time and attention at Eclipse these days, which is the migration of Java EE to the Eclipse Foundation, and under the new name Jakarta EE. In just a moment, I'll introduce I'll have the panel introduce themselves. But to sort of tie this back a little bit to the Eclipse Foundation, one of the things there's two new logos showing up on the screen that, you know, a couple of months ago didn't exist. And the first one, of course, is the lovely Jakarta sailing ship. I voted for it. We had several thousand people vote for the logo choice, and I was actually really excited for once in, every once in a while, I actually get what I want. It happens extremely rarely. And actually, we have a rule at the Eclipse Foundation that as soon as Mike ever says, that'll never happen, guaranteed to happen. Fortunately, I kept my mouth shut about which one I wanted to have, and it actually managed to win. But I think just as importantly is the new Eclipse Foundation logo. And I think you've probably noticed on our website, here at the conference, my colleagues who work at the Eclipse Foundation with their fancy new shirts, that we've got this great new logo. And the reason why that's important, and I wanted to just take a moment to talk about that, is that for the first time in the history of the Eclipse Foundation, the logo of the foundation is different than the logo for the IDE. I'm not sure if you've actually noticed that, but that's actually something that they've always been one and the same for 14 years. And because of Jakarta, because of IoT, because of a lot of different things, that really no longer made sense whatsoever. It really doesn't. The Eclipse IDE is still, in many ways, our most successful project and product from the Eclipse Foundation and the Eclipse community. You know, what that group of people does, you know, every year with the annual simultaneous release and their ability to ship on time and so on, and has really helps sort of illustrate what an open source community is capable of doing, and part of the reason why projects like Jakarta are attracted to come to Eclipse. But the time has clearly come to separate the Eclipse Foundation from the Eclipse IDE, and I personally think that our new logo is a great step in that direction. It's obviously one small step in that direction, but I absolutely, just frankly, love the new logo and the color palette and everything that goes with it. So that's a little bit just on sort of what's going on at the Eclipse Foundation. We're here to talk about Jakarta. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the panel, and we'll start with Dimitri. If you could just introduce yourself and who you work for and what you have to do with Jakarta EE.
Okay, so my name is Dmitry Kornilov. I'm from Oracle. And me and my team are responsible for transferring Java EE projects to Eclipse Foundation under EE4J project umbrella. So we are doing all this hard work of finalizing the projects, going through a legal clearance, go through a core part clearance, transferring it to Eclipse, and assuring that Eclipse accepts it. So going through the IP flow and so on. So the progress so far, I think we are doing well. Maybe you don't think so, but I think we are doing well. We created 39 projects in EE4J top level project. There is a slide indicating that.
Yeah, we'll get there.
It's at the end.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So All projects are in a different stage of evolution right now, but all of them created, all of them started, right? So currently we are working on transferring repositories to Eclipse Foundation. About half of them are already transferred. And our main goal is actually transfer everything and produce a workable open source build of Glassfish. So which is basically our main goal, which we are heading to.
Thank you. David?
David Blevins, Tommy Tribe, and we're involved in MicroProfile quite a bit. We're on the PMC, or I'm on the PMC for EE4J, and of course we're a strategic member, a new one. So we just joined the board. I had our first in-person board meeting this week, and are heavily involved in just Java EE in general, and really excited about the move to Jakarta EE.
Yeah, for me, I'm Emily Jiang. I'm from IBM. IBM is a very active member in the Jakarta EE and MicroProfile, and we really want Jakarta EE to succeed, same as the MicroProfile. Personally, I'm working on Open Liberty and MicroProfile. I'm also in the Eclipse Architecture Council and trying to make sure like Jakarta EE can adopt some best practices from MicroProfile. So that's me.
And I'm James Roper. I work for Lightbend in the office of the CTO. Lightbend's very excited about the opportunities that Jakarta EE brings with more open processes, and we're excited to see what direction it can go in. Right now, because Jakarta EE is primarily focused at the moment on migrating those existing projects, and not really a part of that. Directly in Jakarta EE, we're not doing a lot, but in MicroProfile, we're leading new reactive specs.
Okay, thank you everybody. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides, and basically we're just going to kind of lay out what's going on, and then each slide I'll ask the panel to weigh in and add their color to it as well. So the first slide is to talk about the companies that are making up the working group. And so by the way, when we switch over to you guys, just like feel free to talk about anything in terms of the working group itself. But you know, for those who've been around Eclipse, many of you are involved in one or more working groups at Eclipse, whether it's IoT or PolarSys or Capella. But basically the idea of a working group is to complement the activities of open source projects with support from companies and the ability to extend the open source reach in doing things that projects are typically not great at, like marketing, brand awareness, and in this case, specifications. So one of the things that we are spending a lot of time on in the working group is establishing a new specification process. So the strategic members here, and each one of these have to be a strategic member of the Eclipse Foundation and putting at least 4 people into Jakarta EE related projects. Fujitsu, Tommy Tribe, and Paera are all recently just joined the Eclipse Foundation as strategic members specifically to support Jakarta. Oracle, Red Hat, and IBM have of course been on our board for many years and are big supporters of the Eclipse community and have been for quite a while. I'm not going to go through the whole list of the participating members, but just to call out a couple of them. You know, James is here from Lightbend, typically more known for Scala, but very active in the reactive world and bringing some of those ideas to the community. Then we have Pivotal. I'm sure everybody here has heard of Pivotal and Spring Boot. They're actually really interested in engaging in the standards process or the specification process because they see that as an opportunity to really reinvigorate the Java EE technology and platform. And Microsoft, they're getting more and more engaged in open source, and their acquisition last week of GitHub, I think, is a great example of that. And then I guess the last one I'll mention is Mizuho, which is a Japanese bank, and that's the first sort of enterprise company that's starting to get engaged in Jakarta. So the working group is established, it's running, we're having regular meetings and starting to make a lot of progress. So anybody on the panel want to weigh in add a little more color to that?
I just wanted to comment that having been participating in Java EE for a very long time, one of my dreams of the reasons that I've wanted to stay involved is to try and bring as many people together. And it's something we kind of struggled to do while it was called Java EE. A lot of people kind of got disenfranchised or felt disheartened or lost their faith in the process. And so the number of people participating kind of shrunk over time. And in like one big move from Java EE to Jakarta EE, we have all those logos on the list, which just goes to show how much hope there is at this moment for a major change ahead. And I think that's one thing that cannot be ignored. These names don't just show up for no reason. And if anything, that's going to be the biggest change that's going to allow us to do much bigger things than we've potentially ever done before. I never would have thought that I would see Pivotal bellying up to anything EE flavored. It's pretty amazing, and now we're starting to see cloud providers like Microsoft come into the picture. I mean, if that happens, maybe someday we'll see a Google if they're smart. Or otherwise, they'll just let Microsoft have all the fun, decide not to compete. But it's very, very, very amazing. So I think that's just that's a milestone that's like an 18-year milestone. We haven't seen as many people participating in EE-related standards since the early 2000s.
Yeah, it's true. Anybody else?
Yeah, the other thing I want to add is David mentioned Jakarta EE working group. I would like to mention is a lot of the members from this list are also heavily and actively involved in MicroProfile. MicroProfile has been around nearly 2 years, and it's been really successful. I'm very confident that this work group is going to do a really amazing job for Jakarta EE.
Anyone else? All right. So, of course, in the end, this is all about shipping code. So what we're talking about here is about a very, very large code contribution from Oracle, and including the TCKs for Java EE. And there is an enormous amount of work going on to make all of this possible. So if you just to kind of talk a little bit about the high-level roadmap, what we're going to be trying to accomplish during 2018, then this is kind of we're sort of lay it out pictorially what we're trying to accomplish. The first thing you might notice on the slides is it now says Eclipse Glassfish. So in case you haven't quite tuned into that, so the name Glassfish and that lovely logo have been assigned by Oracle to the ownership of the Eclipse Foundation, and so we are now going to be talking about Eclipse Glassfish going forward. Java EE8 is going to continue in the marketplace for many, many years to come. So Java EE8 is the final release of Java EE. But the major vendors that support Java EE, including the likes of Oracle, IBM, Red Hat. I think actually Red Hat's just on the verge of getting their EE8 compliance certified. They're going to be supporting EE8 for their customers for many, many years to come. So this isn't about EE completely going away. This is about transitioning where the activity of the future is going to happen. So all of the code, the documentation, the TCKs, all of those assets are being contributed to the EE4J top-level project at Eclipse. And then we're shipping, the goal is hopefully by the end of September, we want to ship a version of Eclipse Glassfish, which is certified as Java EE8 certified or compatible. And then while we're working on that, we're going to be establishing a new spec process, and the goal is by the end of this year is to ship a version of Eclipse Glassfish which is Jakarta EE8 compliant or compatible. And to do that means we actually have to establish a whole new spec process and run all 37 specs, or
Yeah, 39.
39.
Well, I mean, there's not that many specs. That's some reference implementation projects in there. So it's maybe half of that, but yeah.
So there's an enormous number of specs that we're going to have to run through this. Anybody want to add anything there?
Other than we need to go as fast as we can.
Yeah.
I mean, but you know, the Jakarta EE8 thing, I'm personally super excited about when we can finally get that to exist, because one of the things that, if you notice the little red arrow at the bottom that says sources, TCKs, and docs, the TCKs being open source is something that hasn't been in existence for the last 18 years. So I mean, like, I'll ask a question: how many people know that there's a test suite that you need to pass in order to become Java EE certified? Okay, how many of you have seen it? Do you work for IBM Red Hat? Then you haven't seen it. So like maybe less than 100 people have seen this test suite. I'm making that number up. I don't have the figures in hand, but it's pretty low. And so the fact that that thing's going to be out there in open source is a really huge deal, because most of the people that I talk to, when they think about certification, they think about, or they think about, you know, specs, they think those are rules on me. Why do I have to read 500 pages of rules that are restrictions on me? And it's like, those are restrictions on the vendor, and they have to pass tests that assert all those things. So you having the ability to see the TCK and update the TCK is like a new form of insurance that you've never had before. So if you have a problem with the portability and you're trying to get something to work on 3 implementations and it worked on 2, but it's failed on the 3rd, your normal outcome at this would be, I guess I can't use this feature. Now you would just go to the TCK and you add a test to make the 3rd person have to pass that test. The other 2 people clearly were passing, but no assertion there, so there's no guarantee that you won't have less people being compliant in the future, but you have the ability to basically raise the bar on the implementations, which provides you quite literally with a new form of insurance that you haven't had before. So you definitely need to be excited about that. When you see these sources show up, you should start digging into them immediately and getting familiar with them, because they're your biggest hammer and your biggest tool in this next 20 years.
Yeah, I would like to mention from my own experience about this TCK. Like 2 years ago, I worked on CDI. So basically, we want to pass through the CDI 1 to TCK. Luckily, that's like a petty license. It's less constraint. However, during the TCK process, during the bug fixing, I broke like a EDB TCK. I said, I cannot see TCK. I'm not allowed even to ask what it is doing. Basically, I was just left in the dark. I said, this interceptor got to be called 1, 2, and 5th. And then I got 1, 2, 4, 5. So basically, I have to guess, maybe this is not correct, or maybe that correct. Basically, I have to try it out, trying to fix the problem. And then it took me ages. So with this clear, TCK in the clear, I think I can fix it like within a few minutes. I'm very, very, very excited to see the EDB TCK.
It's a monster.
One thing also to add to this roadmap, so people are working very hard at the moment to move stuff from Oracle to Eclipse and to transition to Jakarta EE. But while that's happening in parallel, that's where MicroProfile comes in. So MicroProfile started probably with slightly different aims, but what it's becoming now is a place to innovate and incubate possible new features for Jakarta EE. So that's what's allowing us right at this point in time to continue working while all this other important migration work happens.
So I think one thing that we should mention is that when people see these things, they might think, why does this take such a long period of time? Effectively,
lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. So effectively, we're taking something out of a functioning process, which is like the JCP currently, and it has mountains of contracts around it and IP collected under those contracts, And we're pushing this over into an open source type of formation, and people think, well, isn't open source inherently already set up to handle all this stuff? Well, if you watched Simon Phipps's keynote, you know it's not, right? So patents are not really dealt with in this type of situation, and being able to hand them downstream is also not dealt with. And then there's just contract, there's complications involved in the fact that we're going to be modifying the JavaX namespace, and so there's going to be some things which are going to be done in Eclipse, some things which are going to be done at the Oracle side of the fence. So that adds some complexity as well. And so, you know, there's a lot of stuff that has to get solved to be able to do any of this stuff. We're making pretty good progress, pretty amazing progress, actually, considering all the complexity that's there. But yeah, there is a lot of new ground being laid. There has to be a specification process, which I think is your next slide, that actually deals with all the intake of IP and patents, and deals with the distribution of IP with potential patents associated with them. So this is not an overnight process. And of course, we want to do things better than they were when we did them in the last 18 years. So I think, you know, bear with us, but when we get through this, the pace, I think you should expect to see to be more of the MicroProfile style of pace, which is, you know, we've come up with like 3 versions of that in the last year and a half, which is a pretty good record. So I think you should look at MicroProfile to see what Jakarta EE will be once this process is finished.
Yeah, the way I like to describe it is if you think of Java EE, Enterprise Java, whatever you want to call it, which is now at least a 20-year-old technology. And for its entire existence, it's been owned and operated by a single company, ultimately. It's had a particular specification process. It's had a particular brand. It's had a particular and singular group of people that have been working on it. It's had a particular license and a licensing model. It's had a consortium that's managed its specification process called the JCP, and all of the work that goes into managing that, and probably about 5 or 6 other things. And we are literally changing everything at once, right? So there's an unbelievable number of moving parts that we have to actually get into a synchronization point by the end of this year.
Yeah. And of course, the expectation is that we will fix all the things that were wrong. We won't touch any of the stuff that's perfect, and we'll do it all as quickly as possible.
So just talking a little bit about the specification process and how it's going to be different than, so who here has ever done anything with the JCP? Okay, it's a fairly small crowd. But the way that, and so maybe, I'm going to guess that everybody here has programmed in Java at some point in their lives. Because if you haven't, I'm not 100% sure what you're doing here. But the way that Java specs have always worked in the past is a very specific kind of way. And so some of the things that we're doing that's going to be really different is we're going to get rid of the notion of a spec lead. So the way that Java specs have always worked is that each Java spec has a company, which is sometimes an individual, Ivar, but usually a company, and that company gets special rights to all of the intellectual property that's worked on in the spec. So we're going to get rid of that notion. We're going to run the spec projects as if they're open source projects. So for example, one of the things that's the way the JCP, not always, but the way it often worked was the spec lead held the pen. And the spec lead was the only, or the person representing the spec lead was the only person that could make any changes to the specification document as the discussions were going on. We're going to run this as these as open source projects. So if you're a committer on the open source project, you can make changes to the documents, which, by the way, was probably going to lead to some percentage of conflict, or at least passionate debate, which is a nicer word than conflict. But it's going to be a different way of doing things, and I think. But I'd much rather have people, you know, actually arguing about these kinds of decisions rather than having all the power in one spot. For as long as there has been Java, there has been this notion of a reference implementation. So a single implementation that determines, that demonstrates that the TCK can be passed and the spec can be built, but is typically a toy to a certain degree, usually anyways. And there's one of them, and it also helps disambiguate the spec if necessary. And we're going to get rid of that idea. So there can be multiple compatible implementations, but the requirement is that there has to be at least one of these before the spec can go final. So you actually have to demonstrate that the spec can be built and the TCK can be passed. Self-certification, so people who want to claim that they're compatible with the specs are going to run the TCKs themselves and self-certify and provide us a report if we ask for it. And then there's going to be some kind of branding notion. So you're going to see that lovely Jakarta EE sailing ship as replacing the coffee cup. So I'm looking forward to the point, time not too distant future where there's, a JBoss being Jakarta EE8 compatible in the sailing ship instead of the coffee cup. And, WebLogic and WebSphere and so on. I think that's going to be pretty cool. So anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I would like to say this process is very, very, it's kind of very similar to MicroProfile process. Basically, in MicroProfile, we work in the community, not a single person just take full control and say, no, you are not allowed to. Other people feel free to contribute and merge and etc. Everybody has exactly same status. Not like one person is higher than the others. And also we encourage multiple implementations for the particular specifications. Like config, for example, we have Open Liberty implementation. We have Apache Geronimo implementation. We have Wildfly and Tommy Tribe use Apache Geronimo implementation, and also it's there's other companies also work on their implementation. I found that this is really important because we did find some problem where other people doing implementation and flag it out. Okay, this spec is not clear and etc. So this is really encouraging. And also, is the TCK and API will be owned by, published by the MicroProfile process, and all the implementations is either in public or owned by a community, or by most of them are in the open already anyway. So this is really good move.
James, do you have something to add?
I wanted to.
Yeah. So I have got involved in a few JEPs, which is part of the Java, the JCP, at the same time as getting involved in MicroProfile. And just to contrast the experience, so with these JEPs, the spec lead sends out an email to a mailing list saying, this isn't the wording, but it's almost like, here, I have blessed you with some code that you can now look at, and now you are granted the opportunity, and you should feel blessed for this, to look at it and comment on it. And then you do, and they can completely ignore you if they want. There's no place to submit a pull request to update some API, or it's really, it doesn't feel like you can really get involved at all. You can just kind of be there on the side and make some comments that may or may not get listened to by anyone. Whereas in contrast, in MicroProfile, you can create a pull request and people do go and review it, and then there's discussions on it, and there's no one person that's like the gateway. It's a whole community. And so if there are 5 people over here that kind of get interested, who are all from different companies, then it happens, as opposed to just this one company that goes and says, no, I will listen to you, or I won't.
Anybody else?
Do you want to?
Yeah, if I can.
We're all quiet.
So I just wanted to say that JCP process, right? So there were many complaints about JCP process, but it was actually not too bad, right? So we're all complaining about that, but based on that process, all enterprise Java were created for years, right? And it has some actually practices which should be taken into Jakarta EESPECT process. It used to work. Maybe it's not ideal, right? I agree that main complaint that JCP process was slow, right? So I think our goal, the spec committee goal, is to establish a new spec process which takes the best from JCP process and takes the best from MicroProfile. By the way, I wish MicroProfile would join Jakarta E at some point. This new process will be developer friendly, fast enough, and definitely not ruled by one company. So we will like to have some kind of a democracy there.
Yeah, I call it the Goldilocks approach, right? The MicroProfile is a little too hot, JCP is a little too cold, Jakarta E is going to be just right.
That's the
No,
goal.
I
Correct.
disagree. MicroProfile is easy.
Yeah, I would want to agree with Dimitri. I think, obviously there's some good things that were there in the JCP that we want to capture in the new process. And so I don't think that was all bad. I think that when a lot of those things were established, those people back in 1999 or whatever didn't know what the industry was going to look like, and so they were trying to create a standards market for Java with no insights on that we have now. And so a lot of decisions that were made, which were along the lines of, say, you can't disclose your test results to anybody, or to try and prevent situations where a vendor might say, I'm mostly compliant, here you can start using my code, and I'm 98% done, so it's fine, go ahead and start. And then they may never do the 2%, and then there's incompliance in the marketplace. Also, with forcing people to get their certified implementations out within 1 year of a released specification is one of the terms. No one does that. And on that note, one of the interesting things about the proposed new process is having any of the implementations be the one that can make the specification be released. So there is no RI, as Mike was saying. There's no reference implementation. The math on this one is, let's say it takes 15 months to get a certified server out the door. And none of the vendors, except for the reference implementation vendor, can see the TCK until it's final and released. So that means that the people working on the RI are spending, say, 15 months. That will be during the specification process, ideally. But at the moment that that TCK is released, now all the other people in the industry get their first chance to start passing this test. So what is that in math? What's 15 times 2, right? Why has it taken us 3 years on average to do all these specifications? Because that is one of the reasons, right? If, we're going to cut the time in half by having basically a rule where everybody gets to see the TCK during the specification process, so it won't be this thing where when it's all finished, then everybody, there it is. Congratulations, we'll pull the curtain off, and now you can see this big test suite which we have to pass. See you in 15 months. So we'll all be able to start working on the TCK and passing the TCK during the specification process. And the first person to become to pass that TCK, we can use them as the one who is the replacement for the RI. So that fixes two things. One, it removes this kind of serial, the RI goes first and everybody else goes second, which doubles the time to market for Java EE as a whole. But then we're also incenting all of us to kind of race each other and be the first one who can be considered the certified one when the specification is completed. So it does dramatically change one of the gates and things that dictate pace for the specifications. So that's going to be a very, very, very big improvement, which looks small to bullet, but is going to add or subtract months from our timelines. The other one is the no spec lead. You know, most of the specifications that we've put into Jakarta E so far have 2 people as the project lead, and that's intentional. So we don't want like one person there considering themselves to be the singular definer of all technology, that there has to at least be some dialogue. So it's intentionally at least 2, right? So there has to be discussion about things that are controversial. You can't go off list and go, well, we've made a decision, here it is. You know, there's no edicts, right? So all these specifications are going to be done in true open source style, because by design, there's some friction in there that the 2 people leading the project have to have a conversation out in the open about what is the right thing to do when there are decisions that are not obvious and it could go either way.
Well, I'll just clarify that though, but a project leader at Eclipse is a really different position than a spec lead at the JCP.
Servant.
The way that Wayne likes to describe it is a project leader at Eclipse is a position of responsibility, whereas a spec lead at the JCP is a position of authority, right? Those are 2 very different ways to think about it. One other thing I'll just mention on this slide before we move on is that this spec process that we're building at the Eclipse Foundation is initially being driven to a large degree by requirements that are coming from Jakarta EE, but this is going to be the Eclipse specification process. So other working groups within Eclipse that want to start specifying some of the work that they're doing, and I think IoT is potentially an example of a group that has some interest in that. They'll be able to use this spec process going forward as well. Not going to do the full thing on this slide. Well, maybe we will, but we'll see if somebody has something to add. But this is kind of like, so we have a live report card that you can go to on the EE4J top-level project page. And so if you want to follow the progress as we're going through this, this is live. This is based on data today. And so the 20% mark is basically that the project has been created. The 40% mark is that the project has been created and has been checked in. And then there's other things along the way. I think 80% is they're actually building on Eclipse infrastructure, and then 100% is they've actually done an Eclipse Foundation release review and actually released code from the Eclipse Foundation. And as Dimitri was saying at the beginning, our goal at the moment is to get all of these projects to 100% as quickly as, to 80% as quickly as we can. What we want to do is as soon as absolutely possible, you can come to Eclipse and you can download Eclipse Glassfish and run it. Ultimately, this is an open source community, and code is the single most important thing that we do. So let's get code from Eclipse Glassfish into the hands of developers as quickly as we can. Anything to add before we move on? We're getting a little short.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to say that I remember this picture a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
It was a lot shorter in both dimensions.
And it didn't look as good as that.
No, it did not.
Really. So just wanted to say that a lot of progress done, right? And we continue progressing, right? So all projects are created. So a couple of months ago, we have like half projects created, maybe even less, right? And now we are working on moving repositories. More than a half moved already, so working hard to move the rest. And these are only code repositories. So basically these are only the code projects, but we also have documentation projects which are coming next. So we are finishing the code project first. So we transfer everything. We are able to build Glassfish from the open source. That's the main goal. And after that, or in parallel, we will work on transferring documentation, which is also websites and this kind of stuff, which is also very important. Yep.
Okay, so last slide, and we're getting short on time. The main thing I want to talk about is 2 things on this one. One is this whole notion about bringing Java EE to the Eclipse Foundation. This is not just about open sourcing legacy. The reason why these companies are involved and the reason why there's so much effort going into this is what our mission here is to reinvigorate this incredibly powerful and popular technology platform so that it is relevant for the next 20 years of software development. right? So this isn't just about taking the stuff from Oracle and a few other places and just bringing it to Eclipse Foundation and putting it to sleep, right? This is about very much about the future. And the future, as we all know, is cloud. That's where technology is going. So what you call cloud native, microservices, reactive, right? Ensuring that this technology platform embraces these new technologies so that the millions of Java developers who have skills in this language and in this platform, making sure that those skills are going to be relevant for the next two generations of technology. Making this a multi-vendor and a developer-led community is a big transition, but this is really motivated all about the future. And that's why we say from the position of the Eclipse Foundation that this is about cloud-native Java and providing a home for cloud-native Java at the Eclipse community. Anybody want to add? James?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so one of the big reasons for why Java EE was so popular is the vendor agnosticity. So you're not locked in. You have all this code, but you're not locked into the vendor whose application server it runs on, and you're not locked into just hiring developers who understand that vendor. You can hire developers from that have worked on any vendor's implementations. But that was really based on application servers. As we move to the cloud, and especially as we see more PaaS features, serverless functions, and streams running in the cloud, those types of things tend to be very sticky. And so by having a specifications process in today's cloud-native world, we can ensure that companies that implement their systems don't get locked into a particular cloud vendor and don't get locked into just hiring developers that understand a particular cloud vendor. So I think cloud native is very important. Is one of the biggest reasons why specifications are still needed.
Yeah, I add a little bit on this one, cloud native Java. A few years ago, and people questioning, is Java dead? Actually, Java is not dead. Itself is still alive. The only reason is Java EE moving too slow. When we need to write microservices, when we need to upload our application in the cloud, we need the programming model, make sure our application is resilient, and etc. Hence, we come up with MicroProfile. And now is Jakarta EE also positioned to the cloud native. I think as Java developers, as many of you here, and including myself, we have relevant skills to write first-class cloud-native Java applications. Rest assured, it will run well in the cloud, run well in the ESTL. This is like a current generation. I think it will go far and wide.
Dimitri?
Okay, we're saying a lot of words how Jakarta EE should go. It's going to be cloud native and these kind of things. But we actually, in PMC, we released a technical vision document, which all of you can read, and it describes, it contains some kind of bullets, what PMC recommends for the future current Jakarta EE projects to have, right? So you can actually read it. Right? Now Jakarta EE is the same as Java EE, right? So it may look that nothing is going on, right? So we just took Java EE, put into Eclipse Foundation, and it's the same now, right? So what we are talking here is the future. This is what we are going to achieve, right? We are going to possibly remove some Java EE components, possibly add some components, possibly be inspired by MicroProfile, right? So how it looks now, this is not how it will look in a year, or not how it will look in 2-3 years. We are going really to take these directions and make it cloud friendly, lightweight, and open.
Yeah.
1 minute.
1 minute. So I'll just say that I think what we're doing is creating an ecosystem, and I hope that someday, you know, the Jakarta ecosystem is bigger than Jakarta EE, that it can expand into, say, Jakarta FX or Jakarta, you know, ME or Jakarta this, Jakarta that. I think that if we create a open standards-based process that's successful, it can feed a lot of sections of our industry. And, you know, cloud native Java is a fairly big territory, and what is currently EE is a small percentage of that big territory. And so where we can go once we get this all up and running is quite far, and that really depends on all of you getting involved in this. And I would encourage you to not think of this as just an EE thing, and I don't know if I like EE or not. It's about what we can make it. So don't get too caught up about, you know, if you are pro-EE or anti-EE. It's about expanding the Java middleware cloud native space to be as large and as vendor neutral and standardized and, you know, affluent as possible. So this is all of our opportunity to pool resources towards a center, make standards out of them, and create a very, very strong industry for ourselves and for Java in general, and perhaps even a little bit beyond Java at some point.
Cool. And with that, thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy lunch. And hopefully this has given you a little background on what we're spending a lot of our time on at the Eclipse Foundation these days. Thank you.